the 10th year of being together, I discovered the wedding ring that Selma Lowe had hidden away. I thought my girlfriend was finally moved and ready to make things official, but instead, I found her in the arms of Elvis Hudson. She had reconciled with Elvis, the one who caused her family to fall apart. Those who are alive must live well and look ahead. Below is a photo of her wearing the wedding ring, with her fingers intertwined with Elvis's. This time, I didn't say much, I just liked the post and commented, "A perfect match. Wishing you a lifetime together." After all these years, it was time for me to let go. Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. At 3:30 in the morning, I was awakened from my sleep by a call to rescue my drunk girlfriend. In the past, I would sleep through the night without a care. But since being with Selma Lowe, I hadn't had a single good night's sleep. But I brought this on myself and I relished it. Because I love her, she will always be my number one. Even if she hasn't moved on from her previous painful relationship. In the private room 1801 of Heaven and Earth, Selma leaned tightly against me, her eyes hazy as she touched me. "It's you, handsome," she slurred. Then, in a flirtatious manner, she wrapped her arms around my neck and gave me a kiss on the cheek. "I really like you. I like you so much." I was taken aback and gently pushed her away. But Selma clutched my collar, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you love me anymore? Why don't you kiss me back?" I pressed my lips together, not planning to reason with a drunk. Thinking of the wedding ring she had hidden at the bottom of her drawer, my heart raced with hope and joy. I had proposed to her 3 times before, but Selma had always turned me down, citing her lack of desire to have children and enter into marriage. In the blink of an eye, it had dragged on until now. "Elvis, are you not going to want me anymore?" I narrowed my eyes. "Who are you calling?" Selma, however, closed her mouth and didn't say anything. Maybe I had misheard. I pulled the drunken girl up and took her back to her room, gently wiping away her tears and covering her with a blanket. At that moment, dawn was breaking. I booked another room to catch up on some sleep. When I woke up, the sky seemed to have fallen. My phone was buzzing nonstop, with friends in the group congratulating me. "Congratulations on finding your beautiful partner and tying the knot." Some friends even retracted a few messages. I scrolled up and saw a post from Selma announcing her marriage on Weibo. The caption read, "Those who are alive must live well and look ahead." Below was a photo of a woman wearing a wedding ring, holding hands with a man. I recognized Selma at a glance, and Elvis seemed to be unhappy with the misunderstanding among friends, so he revealed his identity in the comments. I gasped. Selma had reconciled with Elvis, the one who caused her family to fall apart. So what was I? A mistress? I threw my phone down and leaned back against the leather sofa in the top-floor presidential suite, watching the continuous rain outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. My heart felt heavy and stifled. It turned out the wedding ring was meant for Elvis, with nothing to do with me. Selma did not want to get married. She just didn't want to marry me. I had been foolishly telling her, "I fully respect your wishes, and I'm willing to wait for you." After a long time, I picked up my phone, resisting the urge to contact her. I only made a snarky comment below, "A perfect match. Wishing you a lifetime together." As soon as I stepped out of the elevator, my phone rang. It was my mom, who was far away in country W, checking in on me. "Son, you're not getting any younger, over 30 now, it's time to settle down. All those times you turned down blind dates because you wanted to play around, you can't do that this time." I chuckled self-deprecatingly and replied, "Sure, my mom and boss." This time I didn't refuse. I had previously pretended to be a carefree playboy in front of my parents. I couldn't let them know their son had been chasing after a woman for over 10 years. Just when we finally developed a romantic relationship, I was suddenly betrayed. Clearly, I was also handsome and wealthy. In the past, the only person I loved and cared about was Selma. I had always worried about her. She used to live next door with her nanny, while her parents were often busy with work and didn't take care of her. That year, I saw her huddled in the corner of the garden, wrapped in a white down jacket, with only her delicate eyebrows and eyes showing, enviously watching me and my parents have a snowball fight. I invited this beautiful sister to come and play with us, but she quickly lowered her head, returning to her aloof, expressionless self. I was amused and stubbornly dragged her, all alone, to my house for dinner. While we were eating together, she secretly wiggled her feet under the table, a faint smile appearing at the corners of her mouth. Later, we attended school together. I thought Selma and I would naturally end up together, even getting married and having children, growing old together, until she met the mixed-blood Elvis Hudson. Elvis was the star of the international elite high school, with every relationship becoming a hot topic among classmates. He could hug 4 different female classmates in a single day, all from different backgrounds. Selma was the 26th. Yes, classmates even numbered them. I was anxious and desperately advised her, "Elvis is not a good match." A male classmate went back to get his forgotten sneakers and stumbled upon Elvis Hudson passionately flirting with a female classmate in class. The male classmate anonymously shared the short video he took, which quickly spread among the boys. When Elvis found out, he wasn't angry. Instead, he laughed heartily and felt proud. Selma Lowe, however, urged me not to speak nonsense, insisting he wasn't that kind of person. Then she suddenly distanced herself from me. I heard she had applied to the same university as Elvis. I also heard that due to some family issues, Elvis couldn't go abroad. I quietly applied as well but was forcibly sent abroad by my parents. When I returned home, Selma stood at the door and threw a snowball at me. I blinked in surprise and looked up. Everything around seemed to freeze, the wind and snow, the flow of cars came to a halt. Selma's cool demeanor was just like my childhood memories of her. "Long time no see," she said with a faint smile. "Yeah, long time no see." I nodded. I had seen her countless times in dreams and photos, always secretly trying to gather news about her. I had just learned she broke up with Elvis, as he had unilaterally informed me. Ignoring my parents' objections, I rushed back immediately. I didn't want to miss the chance to say, "Can you consider me?" I launched a fierce pursuit, doing everything I could to be good to her. Selma never said yes or no, but often spent time with me. I felt anxious and uncertain. One time, after drinking too much, she opened her heart to me. "I'm sorry, Jeffrey. I've been hurt deeply and need time to heal. I'm afraid to start something new. But I feel so happy with you. A happiness I've never felt before." I even took a step back, thinking being friends would be fine. The pursuit lasted for a whole decade, until 3 months ago, when Selma drank heavily after her parents passed away. She looked at me with red eyes and weakly asked, "Jeffrey, do you still love me? Do you want to be my boyfriend?" I replied firmly, "Yes, I love you." Then I didn't know what else to say, so I just held her tightly. After that, I was afraid of reminding her of the pain of being abandoned and backstabbed by Elvis, so I never brought it up again. But unexpectedly, in the end, I was the one who got hurt deeply. My feelings were gradually torn to pieces, only to be trampled underfoot by her. In the afternoon, Selma sent me a message, complaining that she had to attend a gala that night but had no high-end custom gown to wear. I took a long time to think of a reply. In the past, I would have been the first to respond, soothing her with gentle words and helping her solve her problems immediately. Now, she was looking for her husband, not for me, her ex-boyfriend who hadn't even been informed of the breakup yet. She couldn't have a boyfriend in one hand and a husband in the other. Maybe she could, but I couldn't. I felt disgusted. I replied coldly, "Oh, then I can't help you." Selma beat around the bush a few times, and when she saw I wasn't engaging with her, she lost her patience and called me, "Jeffrey, why have you changed? Are you still mad about what happened when I got drunk? Don't make a big deal out of it, okay? I've explained to you that I can't sleep without drinking." Selma's voice trailed off, sounding pitiful. I felt a bit annoyed. How could she act like nothing happened and say these things to me? If she hadn't brought it up, I might have almost forgotten that she previously cried to me about how her friends had many luxury items and that her family had gone bankrupt and could no longer afford a handbag. I loved her and felt sorry for her losing her parents. I didn't want her to suffer even a little. Just yesterday, I was designing the layout for her birthday party venue, planning to give her a surprise. Instead, she treated me like a dog and ran back to reconcile with Elvis. I simply asked her, "What about Elvis? Isn't he buying you one?" Selma paused. "Didn't we agree not to mention him? I have nothing to do with him anymore." I clicked my tongue, finding it ridiculous. Last Saturday, Selma finally agreed to come meet my parents at my father's 60th birthday banquet. But she specifically told me not to pick her up and to spend more time with my parents, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. She wanted to dress up nicely, but I waited until very late, even after the banquet had ended, and she still didn't show up. I was so worried that something had happened to her on the way that I tried to contact her everywhere. Later, I learned she had gone to find Elvis and was turned away. I was furious and had a big fight with her. At that time, she explained it all to me. After a period of Cold War, when she took the initiative to make up with me, I surprisingly forgave her easily. It turned out that I was unwilling to think too much and refused to believe her. So I overlooked all the signs that felt wrong. I was just deceiving myself. I had previously felt sorry for Selma, thinking her parents were driven to death by the malicious competition from the Hudson family. Suddenly, I felt annoyed. I replied dismissively to Selma on the phone. "Fine, whatever you say is what it is. I'm hanging up. Let her and Elvis lock themselves away." Selma was stunned. "Jeffrey, are you jealous?" Before she could finish her sentence, I heard the tone indicating the call had ended. I ran to the mountain racetrack. Speed and passion, a man's way of releasing emotions. Because of Selma Lowe's words, "I'm worried about you," I was happy for an entire week, and after that I never touched racing again. I had just driven out my specially modified racing car from the basement when I saw a figure that was so familiar I couldn't forget it. She was standing with my friend. "Jeffrey." I zoomed past her. As soon as she opened her mouth, the wind caught her words, and the roar of the engine drowned out her voice. Selma looked a bit flustered. In the past, I never neglected her. I always paid attention to her feelings. Selma rarely took the initiative to find me. We were clearly together, and I knew she understood that I wanted to marry her, yet she wore a wedding ring with someone else. All her excuses were just that. Excuses. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became, and the angrier I got, the harder I pressed the gas pedal. The car surged forward like a steel beast. I executed a beautiful drift around a corner. Damn! I flipped the car, and stars danced before my eyes. That kid from the Watkins family didn't even bother to maintain the track. That big rock at the turn must have been caused by the landslide from the heavy rain a few days ago. Before long, the car door was forcefully pushed open, and Selma hurriedly poked her head in, her eyes glistening with tears as she looked me up and down. Trying to suppress her crying voice, she asked, "Jeffrey, are you okay? Is anything wrong? The medical team I called is on their way. Why were you driving so fast? Seriously, were you in a rush to die?" Her tone was filled with anxiety and unease. I groggily took off my helmet, and blood dripped from my forehead. I pushed her away, saying, "You don't need to." She thought that as long as she softened her approach with me, I would turn a blind eye and continue to pretend I knew nothing and love her. She could act as if nothing had happened with a clear conscience. But she had already been tangled up with Elvis Hudson. I tortured myself by scrolling through all of Selma's social media posts, remembering every detail clearly. Her words were filled with deep affection for Elvis and lingering attachment. At that moment, my heart felt like it was being cut by a knife, and I couldn't let it go for a long time. Suddenly, Selma's phone rang. She answered immediately, responding anxiously, "I'll be right there." She looked at me, guilt flashing in her eyes. "Jeffrey, I'm sorry. I have an urgent matter to attend to." I clenched my fists, my knuckles turning white. She used to worry about my safety, reminding me with her cool voice not to drink too much and to avoid cold food. She always remembered what I was allergic to, telling me not to take it lightly. "What happened to Elvis?" She was extremely flustered and blurted out without thinking, "He got hurt." After saying that, she stole a glance at me. My gaze was calm, so calm that it made Selma panic inside. She stammered, awkwardly explaining, "He's in a lot of pain. I can't just ignore him." My family deliberately set up the Hudson family, causing his grandfather to pass away from anger. I let out a light laugh, the smile not reaching my eyes. "Yeah, you should go." I interrupted her. In the past, I was always soft-hearted toward Selma, thinking that feelings shouldn't be judged by who came first. But feelings need to be governed by principles, and so do people. Elvis was clearly seeking revenge. Selma looked at me with tears in her eyes and ran away like a little rabbit. Watching her completely disappear from my sight, my heart ached. We had agreed not to stir up any ripples for each other anymore. But after loving her for over 10 years, she was like a tree deeply rooted in my heart. Now, cutting down this tree was inevitably painful. We grew up together, seeing each other in countless ways, laughing, embarrassing moments, and sorrowful times. Yet I would never see her walk toward me in a strapless wedding gown to the tune of the wedding march. The childhood bond couldn't withstand the twists of fate. Selma finally texted me the next evening, saying she wanted to come to my house to make me pork rib soup. I didn't reply. I remembered one time when I had a fever, feeling all fuzzy-headed and wanting a bowl of the lean meat porridge she made. But as soon as I opened my mouth, she started crying. She choked out, "Every time I see pots and pans, I think of my late parents and the rare, beautiful moments we had as a family eating together." I held back my headache and hurried to comfort her. After a while, she accused me of not loving her and not caring about her. Men are really all the same. If you pursued me because my cooking is good, then why don't you just go after a chef? I was lectured by her while running a fever, my head still spinning. In the end, I only got a glass of cold water. At that time, I even hated myself for saying something that upset her. My mouth was too clumsy. Later that day, I discovered on social media that she was making soup for Elvis every day. Even though Elvis casually tossed it aside, he still complained to his friends, "I just came over and I smell like smoke. It's terrible." And she pitifully told me her hand got burned. "It's not like I asked her to make soup. Isn't that ridiculous?" She seemed to enjoy it. I felt a chill in my heart and suddenly remembered something. I sent Selma a message, word by word. "We've broken up. Don't contact me again." Since she didn't want to say it herself, I said it for her. Then I blocked her. I let out a sigh of relief. Just then, my mom sent me an address and table number, reminding me to go on a blind date and not to stand someone up again. I politely declined. It seemed like Mom sensed something and cautiously asked me, "Son, do you like guys?" And then there was a long-awaited comment. "I'm more open-minded, but your dad definitely wants an heir." "Mom, I just broke my leg. It's nothing serious. Just a few days of rest and I'll be fine." My mom called me angrily, saying, You really need someone to keep an eye on you. As soon as your leg is healed, you must go on a blind date." I hurriedly agreed, afraid that Mom would go on a long-winded lecture. But then the nanny reported me. "You hurt your leg?" The sultry voice seemed to echo in my ears. I was startled and opened my eyes wide. In front of me was a beautiful woman holding a bowl of lean meat porridge and a bag of medicine, putting down her crossed legs and stepping over with her smooth long legs. She tapped my right leg with her fingertip. I winced and asked, "Who are you? How did you get in?" She smiled generously, revealing 8 white teeth. "Mrs. Smith sent me. She said you wouldn't take care of yourself and even hobbled to the bar to drink. So I had to keep an eye on you. I'm the one who was supposed to have a marriage alliance with you. You wouldn't meet me, so I had to come to your door." I felt a bit embarrassed. Turned out to be Yvette Freeman, the marriage candidate I had firmly rejected 3 times before. The first reason for rejection was my ridiculous excuse of, "The zodiac signs don't match. A dragon and a rabbit must have one injury." I heard she wanted to see me again, so I said, "It's not suitable. I just don't feel a connection." In fact, I hadn't even looked at her photo closely. It wasn't until the third time that she finally gave up completely. I never expected she would chase me down to my house. Just as I was about to speak, a call from an unfamiliar number shattered the slightly awkward atmosphere. Yvette Freeman gestured for me to answer the phone first. "Hello, Jeffrey Smith. Why did you block me?" Selma Lowe sounded angry, quietly complaining to me. I had deleted her contact information and everything related to her, including her photos, so she had to borrow someone else's phone to call me. "There's nothing to talk about. I'm serious about breaking up." Her voice was filled with anger. "Why? Why break up? I don't agree. Did I do something to provoke you?" I replied coldly, "Selma Lowe, can you go a week, a month, a year without looking for Elvis Hudson?" Selma fell silent on the other end of the line. As expected, I knew she couldn't do it. After hanging up, I gave Yvette Freeman a self-deprecating smile. "Sorry for making you laugh." But Yvette shook her head and said, "Let me treat you to dinner." On the way, I simply threw away my old phone and had my assistant bring me a new phone and SIM card. As soon as I logged onto WeChat, a buddy sent me a message. "Selma Lowe asked me to tell you that she wants to see you and give her a chance to explain." Selma was persistent and reached out to many mutual friends. But this friend felt a bit awkward refusing because the official announcement on Weibo was accidentally dug up by him. I declined. There was nothing to meet and explain about. Even if she might have fallen for me, it wouldn't fill the emptiness in my heart. Yvette Freeman didn't ask me anything, but she took me to my favorite Western restaurant. It was still a candlelit dinner. As the music started and the lights dimmed, I felt restless, as if I was sitting on a chair with sharp spikes. Yvette, however, smiled and naturally raised her wine glass to me. I quickly raised my glass, but my peripheral vision caught a glimpse of Elvis Hudson dragging the beautifully made-up Selma Lowe outside the glass window. The two seemed to be arguing about something. I remained indifferent and stopped paying attention. Selma finally broke free from Elvis's hand and rushed in, her face drenched with tears, and her eyes filled with anger. "Who is this woman? Why are you having a candlelit dinner here?" Elvis followed her in, sneering. "I thought it was someone important. Turns out it's the young Master Smith who likes to pick up second-hand junk." Before I could react, Yvette Freeman splashed red wine at Elvis, saying, "I thought some dog was barking around because it wasn't tied up properly." Elvis wiped the wine from his face and glared at her. "Yvette Freeman, don't think you can do whatever you want just because your mom is close to my parents. Don't think I won't hit a woman." Yvette scoffed. "You deserve it. Hurry and take your little white rabbit away." Seeing that I wasn't paying attention to her and hadn't even looked at her, Selma's face turned pale. Jeffrey, we can't eat this meal today. Let's go." Yvette also said to me. I nodded slightly. Yvette's eyes lit up, grabbing my wrist as she walked away. Selma hurriedly grabbed my other arm, her expression anxious and restless. "Don't go, Jeffrey. What do you mean by this? Explain it to me." I couldn't be bothered to give a long explanation and casually replied, "It's just as you think." Then I pried her fingers off one by one and turned to leave. Selma's mind buzzed, and her body even trembled slightly. Did Jeffrey Smith really not want her anymore? After being blocked by Jeffrey, she comforted herself that it was fine, that Jeffrey was easy to coax, and it wouldn't hurt to look for him more. At this moment, however, she felt that if she let go, she would never see Jeffrey again. Jeffrey wouldn't give her another chance. She pushed past Elvis Hudson, stumbling as she chased after him outside. In her haste, Selma Lowe tripped over the threshold and struggled hard as she fell to the ground. Yvette Freeman and I heard a loud crash and turned around at the same time. Yvette stepped forward, wanting to help Selma Lowe up. "Stop pretending." Selma shook off Yvette's hand and fixed her gaze on me, saying, "Elvis and I are nothing." My eyes darkened, and after a moment of silence, I looked down at Selma Lowe from above. "What about the wedding ring?" Selma's breath caught. "How do you know?" She hurriedly added, "I can explain." Elvis was in a dark place and wanted to harm himself, so I had no choice but to take the wedding ring photos with him, just to fulfill his last wish. Jeffrey, you can't expect me to just watch someone get hurt, right? But I promise I won't contact Elvis anymore. We can live our lives well. Okay? I was shocked to hear this. Her own words were far more shocking than what I had seen or understood. If her parents were aware, they would probably jump up and scold her. 10 years ago, after Elvis broke up with Selma Lowe, citing our incompatible personalities, he gradually took over the family business. He acted cunningly, loved taking risky moves, and once he secured his position, he repeatedly competed against the Lowe family, slowly dragging down the Lowe group. He even intentionally caused the deaths of Selma's parents. One jumped off a building, the other overdosed. Everything stemmed from a major collaboration project between the Hudson and Lowe families 12 years ago. The head of the Lowe family, Selma's father, sensed the danger and immediately withdrew his investment, severely injuring the Hudson family. In a fit of rage, Elvis's grandfather suffered a heart attack and passed away. Elvis held the Lowe family responsible for this, like a vicious snake lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. He had been raised by his grandfather and was not close to his parents. Selma, this is just a love-struck brain, right? But then again, I was only 50 steps better than her. Now I was completely awake, while she still wasn't. Coming back to my senses, I said, "It doesn't matter anymore. I don't believe you." A casual remark sentenced her to an indefinite prison term. Elvis slowly walked out from behind, his gaze fixed, a subtle smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Selma, will you stay with me a little longer? I'm still really scared." Elvis seemed to have overheard our conversation. Selma's long eyelashes trembled, her expression a complex mix of emotions: anger, frustration, helplessness, regret, and more. She ignored Elvis and quickly stood up, grabbing my arm, tears like beads falling from her eyes. "Please believe me. Don't be so heartless. Don't abandon me. I'm begging you." She bit her lower lip, looking at me with tear-filled eyes. My heart trembled. The countless reflections of lights on the road seemed to keep separating me from her. I hoarsely said, "We've already broken up. There's no possibility anymore. And don't contact me again. You're free now." Selma shook her head frantically, choking on her words. "No, no way, it's not possible." I couldn't help but speak again, softly reminding her, "I told you Elvis is not a suitable match. That's all I have to say." I had already been more than fair to her. Over 20 years of friendship had come to an end. Elvis stepped forward and grabbed Selma's wrist. "Come with me. Your Jeffrey doesn't want you anymore." But Selma suddenly pushed Elvis away and ran off in tears. Once the two had left, Yvette and I walked along the road late at night. Yvette had been silent from the beginning, but I could tell my mood was far from the calm I was trying to portray. Looking at the shimmering river, I whispered, "Am I particularly foolish? Knowing she has someone in her heart all along, yet thinking I could take her place. Over 20 years. We used to be so close." "No." Yvette shook her head and said, "It's all in the past." I completely let go of it. Later, seeing me yawning from fatigue, Yvette bid me farewell. I nodded. "Okay, I'll take you back." Yvette looked up at me, her gaze intense. I instinctively turned my head to avoid her burning eyes. When we arrived at the guardhouse of the Freeman family estate, Yvette sat in the passenger seat, turned to look at me, and opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something. In the end, she only said, "Jeffrey Smith, see you next time." But she didn't move, insisting on waiting for my reply. I said, "Okay, see you next time. Get some rest." Selma took a taxi back home. Since the Lowe family went bankrupt, her uncle, aunt, and other relatives had taken whatever was left. She only had some money left to buy this house. Today felt strange. The house felt empty, and an overwhelming sense of loneliness washed over her. Her phone was eerily silent. Deep down, She knew that person would never reach out to her with nonsensical words again. He no longer wanted her. Looking up and surveying her surroundings, the room was filled with things that Jeffrey Smith had given her. As long as it was something she liked, Jeffrey would buy it for her. There were birthday gifts from ages 8 to 28, souvenirs from trips abroad. There was also the big teddy bear that Jeffrey Smith was afraid would leave her lonely. She rubbed her face against its fluffy fur. She opened the bottom drawer and found a stack of love letters. They were written by Jeffrey Smith himself, sent to her every birthday, from some advice he must have seen on how to win a woman's heart. Hot tears dripped onto the love letters, blurring the words. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand and pulled the letters away, trying to keep them safe from her tears. It was all her fault. Selma Lowe's face lost all color as she collapsed to the ground, holding her head and crying heart-wrenchingly. In the past, Jeffrey Smith always felt sorry for her. Whenever he saw her cry, he would do everything he could to cheer her up. But now he no longer felt sorry for her. At this moment, bitterness seeped into her limbs, and her heart felt like it was being violently twisted by a sharp knife. She had lost the one who loved her. Was there no other way? Could Jeffrey Smith not come back to be with her? The next morning, Yvette Freeman was already waiting downstairs for me. I was taken aback. She walked over and stuffed a large bouquet of sunflowers into my arms, saying, "I hope you are happy every day." I caught the flowers and couldn't help but chuckle. Simple and sincere wishes, thank you. Isn't young Master Smith going to show me around? Yvette Freeman placed her hands behind her back and leaned in slightly, playfully blinking her eyes. I didn't expect her to have this side to her. Yvette Freeman stayed for dinner when I invited her over. She looked at me deeply and said, "Actually, we went to the same high school, just different classes." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "I've liked you for a long time, but you only have eyes for Selma Lowe and rejected the marriage proposal. Do you want to give it a try with me?" Her eyes and voice were filled with hope. I lowered my gaze slightly. "I'm sorry, but I currently have no intention of dating again." Yvette Freeman's eyes dimmed, but she still tried to smile, saying, "It's okay. I'll wait for you. When you want to date again, remember to consider me first." In a daze, I felt as if I saw my past self, so humble. It was as if I was guided by some force as I spoke. "Yvette, let's give it a try." She instantly lit up with a brilliant smile, stunningly beautiful. "Young master, Selma Lowe has been waiting for you at the door all morning. Do you want to see her?" The doorman called in. I waved my hand. "Send her away. Remember, never let her in again." Just as Yvette Freeman and I arrived at the largest shopping mall in City A, Selma Lowe suddenly crashed into my arms. Jeffrey pushed her away, silently holding Yvette Freeman's hand beside me. Once Selma Lowe steadied herself, her eyes turned red, nearly breaking down as she screamed, "You two are together? Impossible, this can't be true." "Nothing is impossible," I said coldly. "Don't let me see you again." Then I walked towards the door. Selma Lowe looked at me pleadingly, her pain overwhelming like a tide. "Jeffrey." Yvette Freeman tightened her grip on my hand. As we stepped outside, Yvette Freeman suddenly pushed me hard. I stumbled towards the edge of the road, not having time to look up. The neon shop sign that was originally hanging high above fell right in front of me, crashing down just a step away. Glass shards scattered everywhere. We were both startled, having jumped in shock. People gradually gathered around us. After a while, I laughed and teased. Could it be that the dragon and rabbit zodiac signs really clash? But Yvette Freeman's eyes turned red instantly. I felt guilty. "I was just joking. Don't cry. Please don't cry." She bent over in pain again, having twisted her ankle and gotten several cuts from the glass, blood seeping out. I glanced at her and said softly, "Let me carry you." Yvette Freeman's face flushed. After getting home, I knelt down on one knee, carefully applying medicine to her wounds. "Hiss, it hurts." Yvette Freeman looked down at me and suddenly felt that this injury was worth it. As our eyes met, our breaths quickened, and I pressed my lips against hers, exploring from the root of her tongue to the edge of her lips. It was a passionate, tender entanglement. After a long time, I finally pulled back, holding her shoulders. Yvette Freeman's eyes glistened with tears, her lips a vivid red. In the vast desert, I joyfully prepared for a proposal. She cried as she accepted. Soon, the news of the marriage alliance between the Smith and Freeman families spread. My parents were also all smiles. After discussing the wedding banquet with both families, it was set for January 1st of the following year. The relevant matters also needed time to prepare. Although it was mostly the elders helping, we two parties were in our honeymoon phase. On a certain day 2 months later, I ran into Selma Lowe waiting at the Smith family's main office. She charged towards me. Unable to enter the Smith mansion, she could only wait at the company over and over, each time coming up empty. I could hardly recognize her at first, but I was the first to speak. "I'm getting married. You should stop coming." Seeing her up close, I swallowed the harsher words. In just a short time apart, Selma Lowe's cheeks had sunken in, her big eyes startling. No longer the cute face she once had. Her already thin figure had become skeletal, as if a strong wind could blow her away. Selma Lowe closed her eyes in pain, asking in a confused and difficult voice, "Can we never go back? Is there not even a little chance?" I nodded vigorously, and I silently pulled away from her. I am a married man, so I can't get involved with my ex and cause misunderstandings. Selma Lowe noticed my reaction and appeared lost and dejected, looking quite frustrated and dispirited. She forced out an unpleasant smile with difficulty. "I understand. Congratulations on your marriage. I'm here to say goodbye. I'm going abroad." I hesitated and replied, "Then I wish you all the best." Although I didn't quite understand why Selma came to find me, it wasn't necessary to figure it out. As the sun set, I turned to leave, watching her lonely figure fade away. I couldn't help but think about whether Yvette Freeman's thin meat porridge would be good to eat, hoping not to hurt myself while trying to hurt the enemy. Later, I heard from my friends that after Selma went abroad, Elvis Hudson wanted to chase after her. But his parents stopped him, telling him to leave the young lady alone. Elvis agreed on the surface but secretly went after her anyway. Eventually, I heard others sighing, saying that Elvis, at such a young age, accidentally got involved in a robbery case in Country S and died due to delayed medical treatment. As for my married life, I was very happy and satisfied, completely unlike what my friends teased about as stepping into the marriage grave. Yvette Freeman and I traveled together, saw different scenery, and experienced the ups and downs of life together. When we encountered problems, we talked them out. When faced with difficulties, we faced them together. Joy and happiness were doubled. My parents, seeing that I had started a family, felt much more at ease and planned for me to gradually take over the family business. I thought about it and agreed. I should take responsibility for this family and couldn't be aimless anymore. The following year, my wife gave birth to a pair of twins. Our little family became a family of 4. The boy looked a bit like his mother, while the girl resembled me. For the rest of our lives, may it be smooth and happy.